Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I am delighted to be here with John Hughes, Patrick McGilp and Paddy Sinnott. I'm not so delighted as to what we're going to be discussing in the next few minutes. So first off the bat, Paddy Sinnott, could you just give me a 1, 2, 3, make sure everything's coming through loud and clear, sir?
1, 2, 3, everything's coming right through my earlug.
Young Patrick, we're going to have young Patrick. How are you? How are you sounding, mate?
1, 2, 3. I could be better. After last night.
Absolutely. And Big Yogi, always a pleasure. I've already had a few requests for a rant, so I'm expecting loads of rants today, big man.
Well, God help us all.
God help us all indeed. God help us all indeed. And let me just say, everything is running nice and smoothly. So we'll pop that on public and we will get rattled right into everything I think we need to talk about today. There's a lot of frustrations within the Celtic support. It's not just us. It's not just an echo chamber. Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. And I've got to say, I'm delighted to have a full house. We need to get as many voices on this as possible, gentlemen. Paddy Sinnott, welcome back. It's always great to see you. Young Patrick, down the bottom there. We'll still be calling you that when you're 40. And John Hughes, you're back in. I've also had quite a few requests this morning, John, for you to not only be on the show, but basically just take to the stage and, you know, I think share your frustrations because a lot of people will be as frustrated as this. John, often when we're on here, we get people saying, you know what, look at all the glory, look at all the success. You guys are just negative. Why are you always going on about the boards? Look at all the trophies we've won. It's come home to roost. Last night was shambolic, John.
Well, I don't know. I'm veering between apoplectic and completely deflated. But for me, that is an unprecedented dereliction of duty. It's unforgivable, inexcusable, utterly predictable, and totally avoidable. There's plenty of blame to go around, but the fish rots from the head down, and we have been going on and on and on and on about the same things now for the last few seasons, and just being completely ignored because they know better. So, you know, there's a £40 million gamble you took for no apparent reason. We're about to sign a winger that's been available for a year. And who knows if he's any good. He certainly won't be up to speed before Sunday even. But, you know, I mean, was that the master plan, was it? One winger and a backup left back. That's who we were going to sign if we qualified. That was going to see us through the Champions League. You imagine that team in the Champions League, the way things are. The consequences of this lack of accountability, which equals utter contempt, and the staleness in the squad, the lack of form in the squad, and that contempt for the fans manifests on the park, and the lack of competition for places, and the clear message that not only are we not world class, but that settling for it'll do as if you're at the end of the night with the beer goggles on is perfectly acceptable. You know, at this level right now, we're nearly as laughable and deluded as the Rangers when it comes to these imaginary standards, world class, absolute nonsense, lies, manipulation of the fans to extract as much money as possible. We are not on the same page. We are not on the same journey. It's just pure lies. And you know, I was at Celtic Park for the last couple of games, and for 3 halves out of 4, it was grim, incredibly grim. And then we got back into that last night. But look, I'm almost, you know, people are saying rant, what again? The same thing.
I know.
Do you know what I mean? Like, look, I mean, so I said before, there needs to be accountability, and heads must roll for that. Heads must roll, no question. At any other operation, you took a £40 million gamble and you lost. You've got to go. Now, you tell me out of this board who's going to go. Dermot Desmond, non-executive director. Tom Allison, non-executive director. Dermot Desmond, by the way, has been serving 30 years. Tom Allison, 24 years. Peter Lawwell, you remember, as chairman, he's also a non-executive director. He's got about 24 years in total. Sharon Brown's done 9 years. Brian Rose has done 2 years. So Brian Rose is the only one of those who actually qualifies under corporate governance as an independent director. Non-executive, you're supposed to be independent and bring a fresh view to the board. right? And you've also got Chris Mackay on there and also Michael Nicholson. Who's going to get sacked and by whom? Do you know what I mean? Where's the accountability ever going to be? In the last sort of near 30 years, there's been one person sacked, and that's Don Mackay, right? And he was sacked because he wasn't Dermot's man. Dermot has his man in there. He's perfectly happy with the job he's doing. Who's going to hold anyone to account in here?
Nobody.
Absolutely nobody. So, the ranting now serves no purpose other than to express the frustration, express the anger, and express the utter disappointment at the lack of joined up thinking and the gamble that they took for no reason. It wasn't necessary. We've lost to a team with a European coefficient equivalent to St Johnstone. Right? This is beyond a disgrace. Beyond a disgrace. And the reason why I'm saying unprecedented, yes, we've had embarrassing European failures before. But when was the last time we had an embarrassing European failure when we're sitting on 30 million from this window and 80 million in the bank? Ever.
Absolutely. John,
Ever. Unprecedented.
It qualifies as the worst because of that, because of the scenario that we find ourselves in, Paddy. And I'm going to pick up on one point from John. You know what? We will touch on the performance. I think a lot was said last night about the performance. It was absolutely brutal. And we'll look at some of the failings on the park and by Brendan Rodgers. But we've opened up with the board. And I think John makes a really important point, Paddy. Who can be held accountable for this? Because you have a very clique mentality whereby it's a shows your medals mentality, isn't it? Look what you have had in the last 25 years. What are you complaining about? And that is the mentality to fans. You're a very prominent blogger, Paddy. We have a prominent platform here. We still have the fanzine movement. We still have a very lively and active ultra movement. We've got an association. We've got an affiliation. However, none of them are listened to when it comes to decision making at Celtic Football Club, Paddy. So I think that's the pertinent question that John's asking there. Who's held accountable and how are they held accountable as well?
Well, no one. No one's held accountable. And just like you said at the very beginning there, the clique mentality protects everybody. On that Celtic board, there's not one of them that's going to turn around and say, well, you need to go because of X, Y, and Z. And like you said, they'll always look at the success off the park, their finances. They'll look at the success on the park and say, well, what have he got to complain about? There's plenty to complain about. Going back to Dermot Desmond, I'd written about a quote that Dermot Desmond had said in 2020, just as the COVID season was kicking off. I wrote about this in 67 Hail. And this is what Dermot Desmond said about us in Europe, Celtic in Europe. He said, Europe is so important as a yardstick of our football progression. On a sporting level, I think the Celtic team we have now, and this is a Celtic team that had, I think at that time, Diego Laxalt, X, Y, and Z, is as good as at any time in the last 25 years, no doubt, and that's even without a player like Henrik Larsson. If you ask me if the Celtic team today, back in 2020, would beat the one that reached the 2003 UEFA Cup final in Seville, I'd say yes. Well, what would they say about this team? What would they say about this team? How would this team fare against even the team in 2020? Because I'm telling you now that what we saw the last couple of days, they would struggle to even beat them. But what is also interesting is he was asked what he saw, his vision of Celtic in 2025. So 5 years ago, the reporter that spoke to him says to him, what is your vision for Celtic in 2025? And Dermot said, I'd like to be able to say that in 5 years' time, our team is better than any of the great teams that were led by Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, Brendan Rodgers, and Neil Lennon. That was 5 years ago. Well, it's 2025 now, Dermot. Where's
and
that
we're
team?
nowhere near it.
Miles off it. And I just can't believe that it's been allowed to happen. And we saw it. We saw it coming. It was coming well before the first game against Kairat. It was coming in St Mirren, the opening game of the season. We saw it. There was a lack of penetration, a lack of imagination. There seemed to be no one taking accountability on the pitch. Never mind taking accountability off the pitch. We had one decent performance against Aberdeen A decent second half against Livingston, and it was back to normal. And again, within the first 10 minutes of the tie at Kairat last night, I knew watching that game how it was going to end up. We were never scoring last night, ever. So what's happened? Who's going to be held accountable? Absolutely no one.
Can I just say, Paddy, see when it went to penalties, did anyone think we were going to win in penalties?
Nope.
You can see from the very first penalty, look in the players' faces that they'd gone. That was it. You could tell from the very first penalty how that was going to go. And we've had an issue with penalties for years, well before this year. We've had an issue with penalties for even before Ange Postecoglou's time. So he knew it was going to happen. It was an absolute shambles from the start to the end until now.
You know this, we obviously did our usual with regards to the match day streams, but we also had a fan zone in Glasgow at BAaD Design, and you could sense that mood within the room of Celtic fans who had no belief that we were actually going to come out of that tie with a victory, be that in extra time or when it went to penalties. There was a real flatness to it, and I think there's a flatness to the team. We are going to be speaking about the systemic issues. They are systemic. You're talking about 5 years ago there, Paddy, and you know, the view of where we're going to be in 5 years. We have regressed in that period. We've regressed in the last 6 months.
So I was going to say, Paul Johnson's Munich, we've regressed.
Yeah, big time.
And sold
well,
out.
The big question that people are asking are Celtic a Europa League? We're not even a Europa League team at this moment. But half a year ago, Patrick, we had that glimpse into what it could be like to be dining at the Champions League table. We're all talking about how great this new structure was of the Champions League, the fact that we get 10 games. And I keep going on about this. A previous interview to the one Paddy mentions there, and I will share it at some point, was an in-depth interview that Dermot Desmond gave with the Celtic View. This was a long time ago. And he was talking about, moving Celtic onto a different platform. Celtic were potentially bigger than Manchester United. You're never going to get as close to a European Super League as what the Champions League now is, Patrick. And we haven't even bought a lottery ticket for it. We've absolutely gambled, as John Hughes said earlier on in the show. And it's almost a quarter of your games if you play 10. If you play 10 games in Champions League, it's like a quarter of your league fixtures. I mean, you're never going to get as close to a champion, like a European Super League as we're currently encountering and experiencing. And we've just basically blew it. It's been embarrassing. But the big question, I think, and we'll talk about it this week, and people will disagree in the comments, it's what can you do as a fan about this? What can you actually do? I mean, we're discussing it just now. I think you can stabilise. I think you can bring groups together. But what realistically can we do, Patrick, as Celtic supporters?
Well, that depends who you blame. Obviously, the players and the manager have to take a certain amount of responsibility. Obviously, they're better players than the Kairat team, and on balance, should have probably won the tie. We were, I think, 1-10 before a ball was kicked. We were 1-3 even after the first leg. I think even at half time last night, we were 1-3 in order to go through. So massive favourites. Players have to take their share of the blame, as does the manager. With every passing day, it's less and less likely that Rodgers stays beyond this season, and I think you can wave that idea goodbye after last night. For whatever reason, we are not getting business done. We've still only spent £3 million. The window shuts in 5 days. It's absolutely crazy that we're even discussing these small figures. So they have to take a certain amount of responsibility, and we've had the chance of sack the board at the last 2 home games, and John, you've just listed all the executive and non-executive board members. I think there's only one person on that board that matters, and that's Dermot Desmond. We had these issues in the last decade under Lawwell, and when Eric Riley was the finance director. Nicholson and Mackay seem to come as a two. They've always seen together in AGM videos and all that sort of stuff. So they're the two that are really running the club. But in my opinion, they've got to be puppets for Desmond. I mean, we heard up at Tannadice, I keep talking about it, Rodgers was talking to Dermot Desmond about a contract extension for Dyson Maeda. Why is Dermot Desmond involved in a contract extension for Dyson Maeda? He does not need to be involved in that. He is 34% shareholder, a non-executive director. That should be dealt with, other people at the football club. So, in my opinion, the problem is Dermot Desmond, and probably always has been Dermot Desmond. He is the one that instills the mentality, it's not even thriftiness, as John said. It's pure reckless gambling. We have enough money to buy quality players to absolutely guarantee Champions League football. If we had a half-decent forward line and maybe one or two more players in the middle of the park, we would have cruised by Kairat Almaty, no question. But again, we choose to skimp on players, wait till the last minute, put in ridiculous offers for £5-10 million players, bidding, was it 1.5 or 2 million for a £10 million winger over in Belgium? Was it Jensen a month or two ago? Completely devoid of any sort of strategic approach. And again, John, you are mentioning world class. We've got the world class gazebo out on the Celtic Way for the world's press to descend upon because our media room isn't big enough. An actual tent outside the stadium where we invite all these players and journalists and managers from around the world. And that's allegedly the world class standard that we're aiming for. Last night, 210 minutes, or sorry, 120 minutes, 210 over the tie of world class football. World class at putting you to sleep, maybe, because it's probably outside the COVID season the most disappointed I have ever been in my 11 years as a season ticket holder, just because of, as you say, tens upon tens of millions of pounds in the bank, a clear path, an easy draw. Imagine we get drawn against Club Brugge or any other sort of quality side in these qualifiers. We lucked out again by getting a really good draw, and we still made a mess of it. And the disappointment for me comes because I thought we had moved on from this period where we gamble with Champions League qualification. We made €46 million last season. Fair enough. We won a few games. We get into that playoff round. Qualification alone would have been slightly less than that, but you still get a big pot of money for just being in the Champions League. What executive team in the world who costs their company €46 million when the turnover is £125 million? I mean, we'll get 10, 15 from the Europa League probably, but that's 20, 25 million that, whoever's responsible, be it Dermot Desmond, Chris Mackay, Michael Nicholson, somebody at the football club has cost us that money by failing to prepare yet again for the most important part of the season financially. So, yeah, in my opinion, you asked me, who's responsible and how do we evoke change? Dermot Desmond is responsible, along with all the other major shareholders, and the only way to get rid of these people is to buy the shares off them, which unfortunately is a really difficult and expensive task. I think the executive team are just puppets and just do Dermot's bidding for him. So we have the Celtic Trust, and they gained a lot of prominence during COVID. Obviously, the success we've had the last 4 years, it sort of died down. But it's going to ramp up again now because what an absolute failure this has been. And I hope, whether it's the Trust, whether it's, Acsom, whether it's some other Celtic fan group, whatever springs up out of this, there needs to be a strategy and an organisation in order to buy the shares of the people who make the decisions. Obviously, Dermot owns so many shares, it's going to be difficult. But there are smaller shareholders. Peter Lawwell owns half a percent. Tom Allison on the board for 24 years, owns 3.5%. James Mark Keane 6.2%. Chris Trainer 11%. If there's some sort of 5-year, 10-year plan to get fans together, build a pot of money and try and buy these guys out, I think it is more than possible if there's enough unhappy supporters. So I hope there is a strategy that emerges, but it is these major shareholders, I think, who are responsible for this failure, and we really should not be operating like this. After the 3 seasons that we've had in the Champions League, I thought we were beyond this, but obviously not.
You're talking there about the 3 seasons in the Champions League, and I'll throw this one over to you, John, because it's about building on that, building on 3 seasons of that income stream, right? And then all of a sudden thinking, you know what, this is easy, this is our scoosh, and we're going to make it because it's just Kairat. Even if it is just Kairat, Brendan Rodgers at virtually every press conference is talking about the importance in bedding players in. We've had 7 pre-season games, John, 4 domestic games. And you think to yourself, well, you could get 10 games under your belt before you kick a ball in Europe. Why not do it? Complacency and all this kind of stuff has been thrown and levied their way by Chris Sutton, and I don't disagree with it. I just think they're just comfortable. Dermot Desmond 20 years ago is a different animal to what he is now, John. That just happens with age. That happens with getting richer and older. And he doesn't have the same passion or get up and go that he would have done 20 years ago. I mean, even when you look at the appointment of Brendan Rodgers, it's just, let's return to somebody that's been here before.
Yeah, no, getting richer and older, I can definitely feel that one, look, the makeup of the board is the first thing I said is shambles. The problem with you need at least 5% just to force an EGM or an AGM, and that's going to cost about £8.5 million unless you find at least that many shares. So you can't even force a meeting where in that meeting the rest of them will just do what they're told and shut you up. So you're spending potentially £8.5 million as an act of protest to get told to shut it at a meeting. Mm-hmm. I think the problem's more significant than that. I think you said, Paul John, that the Celtic Trust have about 160,000 shares as it stands. Yeah. Dermot Desmond has 5.8 million shares. So to try and supplant him is going to be very problematic. And I wouldn't care about supplanting him if he would just keep his nose out of things and let the executive team that he apparently trusts do the job. But the problem is the job that they're doing is his bidding. They're not bringing anything to the table other than doing what they're told. So it's Dermot's strategy to wait until the last minute because he thinks he's a great deal maker and he's a genius and we're all just stupid plebs that don't know what we're talking about. And it's a complete failure and has been. In fact, recruitment since Brendan Rodgers come back has been an utter shambles. Mm-hmm. Even the good players he supposedly signed, Ida and Engels, were overpaid for because of taking that attitude. And the rest of it has just been a shambles. Apart from that one window, bringing Jota back, but I mean, they have been chipping away at this squad. This is the bare bones of Ange's team, right? And so it's not just about, the reason why football is difficult, because you can't just, it's not a linear thing. You can't just build on that team because they were great last season. People will go off for them. People will get their heads turned. People will become stale at a club. That's what happens. That's why Alex Ferguson was so ruthless in moving people on. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't give you time to settle, or he would at least let you know you weren't safe, so, I mean, you can see they're stale. You can absolutely see that. You can see that there's been a loss of form, massive loss of form with some players. And you can see that some players are just very clearly not good enough. And that constant chipping away, that constant reducing the quality of the squad and banking the money, this is where you end up. This is where we are now. People are still saying, do something about it then. Do what? Tell me then. If I knew what to do about it, I would do something about it. If I had a spare 150 million, I'd throw a bid in for the club. Do you know what I mean? So other than that, what are you going to do? The last time there was any action taken of any note was Dermot Desmond when he got peed off at the Rangers directors for getting up in his face when he was in the director's box. And that's the last time we saw any meaningful action take place. And I don't understand what the point of this has been. What was the point of bringing back Brendan Rodgers, a man who half the support hated? What was the point in bringing him back and then not backing him at all? Not giving him anything that he asked for, which he was asking for publicly. What are the meetings happening between... One of the most disturbing things I heard was one of the boys in Celtic Underground, it might have been Stephen, a few weeks ago, was saying that they asked Brendan Rodgers was saying things, a meeting of, I think it might have even been like a Celtic Trust or a supporters meeting, and he was talking first time round about how terrible the recruitment process was and how he's not getting anything and all the rest of it. And he said to him, so you're telling the board this, so aren't you? He's like, no. You're talking to them the same way as you're talking to us? No. What is the point of you? I mean, if you're not up in their face demanding that you get those players, what Who's doing that? What is happening? Because if you expect this board to do it, and that's the one that really made me laugh, well, we've got to trust the board. This board, this same board for 20 odd years, we've got to trust this board. Okay, on what basis are we trusting this board? Or they get the business done by the end of the window? Do they? Do they? Because we're now looking at potentially selling some of our formerly best players. And before the end of this window, we'll be lucky if this team's as good as it was last night by the time this window shuts.
That's a worry, John. That's a worry. And I'm going to throw this one over to you, Paddy, because when I was watching it last night, I'm thinking to myself, right, well, we've not even spent the money that they tend to ring fence whatever comes in, right? So we've not even spent that. We know money came in for Kuhn and Lagerberg, a few million quid come in for him. Then we've got the sell-ons, etc. as well. So we know that there's money there. So there is no need to sell anybody else. Plus, we've got the money sitting in the bank for the rainy day fund, and they have created the rainy day themselves. So we shouldn't be selling anyone. But in the back of my mind, Paddy, I'm thinking if we get a bid for Dyson Maeda, they'll sell him. They will sell him, and they will use the Champions League failure as a smokescreen. That doesn't wash, doesn't cut the mustard for me.
No, and let's not forget the £5 million we got for Bernabeu as well in February. That is another one I think seems to get missed. Mm-hmm. The problem I've got is if they're planning to sell these players with a view to kind of, would you call it, facilitate a loss of Champions League money, there's no guarantee they're going to get the kind of money that they could have got from last season. Because in current form, Dyson Maeda is nowhere near it. So is Arnie Engels, so is Adam Ida. Rio Hatate flits in and out of form now and again. Same with Cameron Carter-Vickers, but then his injuries probably tell you that no many teams will take a punt on him either. How do we get to this board? Nobody knows. I mean, look at the furore over the price of the Newcastle tickets. When they decided to charge fans £25 for a Newcastle ticket. Online, that furore was rampant. So you're expecting the stadium to be at least half empty. But it was an almost 45,000. It was almost a 45,000 capacity. So people are still going to buy the tickets. People are still going to buy season tickets if you give them up. People are still paying £10 a year to be on the season ticket waiting list, which is apparently I don't know how long now, 6 years long. So you're getting money for that as well. There's so much money coming to the club. It's not simply down to kind of starving the club of money, because it will never be starved of money now. It will never be starved of money. I don't know how we do it. I don't know how fans can kind of elicit that change. Since March, when we signed a deal with Adidas, there's been 9 merchandise releases. 9, more than how many players have signed. We've released 9 pieces of merchandise.
Sorry, Paddy, can I just say the point I meant to make earlier was that was the last meaningful change that Dermot made, except when the fans protested about Neil Lennon in the COVID season, and then he doubled down as much as any man could double down. So what's going to happen if we protest now? What do you think he's going to do? You know, that was the point I meant to make. Apologies.
No, nothing. Do nothing. I mean, and then what you've got to look at is when Brendan Rodgers goes either next summer or before then, who's going to want to come into this club to take this club forward?
Precisely.
But Ange Postecoglou fell in our lap, but there's make no bones about it. I don't care what anybody says. He fell in our lap back in 2021, and then obviously Brendan Rodgers came back. But any manager worth their salt who's got a reputation of being a good manager, or being a decent manager, doing things his way, is never going to come to our club. So who do we end up with after this summer, or next summer? Sorry.
How do you sell that to an aspiring manager?
You don't. You can't. And if Rangers get their act together after this season, we could be in serious bother. We're just lucky that they're as bad as they are.
Well, there's there, but the other thing there is as well. Let's look at the strategy. So Ange Postecoglou came about pure luck after the Eddie Howe debacle.
Yep.
Jota was sold pure luck to insane Saudis, right? Matt O'Reilly was pure luck because we didn't get Riley McGree. Right, so there's a huge the guy that transformed the club from a position that we couldn't have got out with Eddie Howe, no question. Only Ange could have done that job because of these contacts there, right? So we got incredibly lucky there. We get incredibly lucky with £50 million worth of transfers right? And rather than take that as some sort of indication to improve the system, they're just going, well, we're brilliant and we know what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Lucky doesn't begin to cover it.
No.
You look at the transfers of the Ange Postecoglou era, add them up, and how much money we've actually made on the players being sold, John. So the knock-on effect of Ange being here for a couple of years, and I agree with Paddy on this. I've spoke about it on Acsom before. I think we're absolutely locked out on Ange. They tried to tell us at the time that they had been pursuing Ange Postecoglou alongside Eddie Howe. Ange gets interviewed when the dust has settled and he's had success, and he concedes that he didn't get a phone call until 48 hours after Eddie Howe had knocked us back. But because the success was happening at that point, nobody really bothers about that. You know, it's just, we got on man and he brought in these tremendous players. I'm going to bring in some of these comments, but before I do that, let's talk about the responsibility of the gaffer, of course, and the players. I'm now looking at it, and if I'm going to be brutal, and I think it's time for a bit of brutality, we're now relying on a goalie who is just about 40 years of age, and I'm sorry, but he doesn't look fit for me. He doesn't look fit. And I'm watching him in the penalties doing his Bruce Grobbelaar legs and all the rest of it. Save one, Casper. I'm not interested in all that nonsense. Just save a penalty and contribute to the Scottish Cup final or contribute to last night. There's no backup to Kieran Tierney. And, you know, when I'm looking at the Champions League squad, we don't even include Inamura. But we've got 6 centre-halves in the squad. Kieran Tierney can't finish. Shocking, Paddy. Shocking squad management. Tierney can't finish 90 minutes. We know he's coming off at 70 minutes. We know that results in Scales going to left back. It's a shocking situation to be in. Now, with regards to Simpson Pusey, there's a bit of a contradiction here because Brendan Rodgers said the other day there he's not going to be available until after the international break. Yet he's sitting on the bench last night. And we've got Inamura, who apparently is fit and ready to play because he played against Livingston, and he's not in the squad. It's incredible. Since, you know, Brendan Rodgers has come in, we've spent £15 million, not including loan fees on Simpson Pusey, £15 million on centre-halves, yet Liam Scales is still the best option. Cameron Carter-Vickers is in first gear. I don't know why, but he's strolling about the games. He's passing, his distribution range is non-existent, and actually Liam Scales is playing better than him. We've got a situation at the moment where we're playing Yang, who was a third-choice striker, winger. He's now the first choice. Amy Engels, a player who I've stood up for just over a year now, I think, can't get a set piece past the first man. But we've got Luke McCowan, who can't find a pass against Livingston, and we're bringing him on last night to try and save our embarrassment. James Forrest, what age is he now? 34? And he's still the first pick. Adam Ida, I don't know what has gone wrong with him because we have seen that he can do it, yet he looks completely non-interested, disinterested, lack of fitness. You know, he's got an inability to learn. And then you've got Brendan Rodgers. And Brendan's a guy that I have stood up for time and time again. And he just comes out in the press conferences and he's saying, I don't know what my budget is. Between now and Monday. Paddy, I mean, what kind of an answer was that?
That for me, I mean, I'm still right about it today on the site on 67 Hill. That for me was alarming. I mean,
abysmal.
What are they talking about then? What sort of kind of targets are they setting at the start of the season? This is your budget for the Champions League. This is your budget if you don't make it. But yet he comes away with that after getting put out of the Champions League. He doesn't know what his budget's going to be. Doesn't know what players he can sign. I was less speechless with that. So absolutely speechless. And we'll get to Rodgers in a minute because he's culpable for some of this as well.
Yeah. See, when you're looking at the team, Patrick, I'm looking at the team now and I'm concerned. Because it's not just 2 or 3 fixes. If we're just bringing in a lone left back loanee and we're bringing in Balakwisha today, if that's it, we're going to struggle this season. And, you know, I do think that Rangers are poor. But we're going to drop a lot of points because the squad at the moment is poor from top to bottom.
It's very poor. Poor squad management, as you say. I mean, what John said there, he's been over and seen the 2 games at Celtic Park in the last week, and there's been 1 good half of football from 2 games. We struggled against St Mirren. Luke McCowan, deflection, opening game of the season. Pittodrie played okay. I thought we were quite flat, but obviously we got the job done. Negan played quite well. So it's not really been that good a start to the season. And we've, again, as John says, we've totally lucked out. A massive part of our success over the past decade and a half has been Rangers just absolutely imploding. I mean, they've imploded at the start of this season. They literally imploded 13 years ago. So much of our success is down to that, in my opinion. There's not some massive strategy from the executives on our board. But the squad is in serious disrepair at the moment. I think we'd all agree that the front three is just a shambles. But that wasn't the problem last night. I mean, it was definitely part of the problem, but we couldn't get a shot off and goal. So you're talking about a creativity problem. And, for a change, our, European woes have not been sort of galling defensive errors. Normally there's a good few defensive mistakes when we're knocked out of Europe. We can't score a goal. That's our problem. There's absolutely no creativity. No one seemed to stand up and take responsibility. I remember watching Callum McGregor's interview after the game last Wednesday, and he said, fans have got to remember that we've got another tie and we can go over there and we can win the game and we intend on winning the game. That is the worst Callum McGregor performance I've seen in a long, long time. So many mistakes last night. Absolutely terrible. And he's actually came out. I mean, he came out after the game and said penalties are a lottery. They went a lottery against Aberdeen. Aberdeen had penalties in the top corner. Teams practice penalties. I don't know if we did. I like to think that we did. But teams practice penalties, so they're not a lottery, Callum. He actually came out. This is a quote from the BBC. Everyone's been quite vocal about what we need. We need help. We need players. We need to have a strong squad if we want to compete on all fronts. That doesn't change after tonight. The players still need help. We need bodies in the door. So not only is the manager coming out and begging to sign players, the captain is also saying that the squad needs help. And you can't really blame him. We have had a wafer-thin squad in terms of who we can rely on. Last season, we had about 13 players who I would deem, quality. Beyond that, the drop-off was stark. And so these 13, 14 players have been playing near enough every minute possible. And, I mean, they must be knackered, especially with the football, the international football that you need to fit in as well. So, I mean, it is clear that we need bodies in the door, but as you say, the squad's an absolute mess. I mean, I thought Yang should have been shipped out after that cup final. That was a disgraceful performance. And still, somehow, with the business that we've done and failed to do, he is now a starting winger. James Forrest, 34 years of age in the final year of his contract, a starting winger in the biggest financial game of our season. And then Adam Ida, not trusted to start the game, steps up and takes the first penalty. I mean, again, this comes down to the manager. Some of the decisions that he is making is absolutely wild. Arnie Engels is our first choice penalty taker. He should have taken the first penalty. He scores his penalty. Ida does not. I think Ida is probably typical of a confidence player. His confidence must have been pretty low when he's not starting a game like that. And then he comes on and misses a penalty. I mean, where is his confidence going to be now? So we've got a lot of guys in the midfield who on paper are good options, quality options, but they certainly didn't perform to that standard in this tie. The defence, I mean, I am one of Scales' biggest critics, but last night and throughout the start of this season and parts of last season, he genuinely has been our best centre half. Now he's capable of misplacing a 5-yard pass, but last night he was our best centre half. Cameron Carter-Vickers was, trying to put it on a plate for Kairat Almaty at times. I'd be playing Donovan ahead of Ralston. He looked really eager and really direct when he came on last night for the last 20 minutes. He looks a really good player. But I mean, to sign Kieran Tierney, knowing he can only last 60, 70 minutes, he's given Inamura, who he seems to not like. Then he starts him against Livingston, but doesn't include him in the Champions League squad. The decision-making, top to bottom, is pretty bizarre. The squad is in a bit of a mess. But yet, out of sort of good fortune and hopefully a good performance, we could end up 9 points clear on Sunday. Big if, the way that we're playing at the moment, but we could end up 9 points clear. It puts you in a fantastic position in the league. So obviously there's still a full season to go. It's not a disaster by any means.
Do you think, Patrick, we can really overcome the 7th best team in Scotland?
Well, we failed to get by a team that's ranked below Championship St Johnstone. So it should be quite a tough ask, to be fair. I seen it described as stoppable force meets movable object on Twitter. after last week's results. It could end up being, I mean, Gassam versus Ralston and Maeda versus. Well, again, Maeda totally fallen off a cliff. How many one-on-ones is he going to sky over the bar?
Oh,
That is an
Okay, can I just say,
ridiculous.
never mind the one-on-ones. One of the notes I had from the game the other night is, you see even more when you're at the game, it's up close. He looked like a competition winner that couldn't control a ball. Every time the ball went to him, it bounced off him. It took him 4 touches to get the ball under control. It was unbelievable.
When he takes a bad touch, he then goes and fouls the guy, which totally kills any momentum that we had.
It was unbelievable to watch. And the other kind of thing to watch, right, okay, so we could go through the individual players and I'll come back to that, but systemically speaking, the tactics are just shocking. The manager has got it all wrong. It's all wrong. Epitomised by, I mean, that one point during that first game. So Scales has got the ball. He's like on the 18-yard line. Kieran Tierney's completely unmarked, about 30-40 yards away, standing on the wing. No one not anywhere near him. So Scales passes to Carter Vickers, who obviously can't pass the ball forward. It's a genetic thing by all accounts. He passes it back. Carter Vickers, where momentum goes to die. And he passes it back to Scales. And Scales then runs forward 40 yards, closing down all the space that KT had, and then passes him the ball. And that whole thing's taken about 2 minutes. And that is absolutely indicative of the speed of our play. It is brutal and it serves no purpose. When we were playing well last year, we were allowing the teams to come on to us, and then our passing was so good we were getting out of it. I wouldn't trust them to pass wind at this point. It was absolutely... we didn't go over the halfway line last night for about 20 minutes. And I think at some point, this is why I typed last night, we get the cutting edge of a soggy sponge, as toothless as a pirate with scurvy. If they passed the Dutchie, they'd drop it. If they passed wind, they'd miss. The accuracy of a blind sniper, the worst two-leg performance since Post Malone fell off a stage. Right? So... and that was, the game wasn't even over at that point. It was so
5 minutes in, John.
But it was desperately, desperately bad. And you can go through the individual performances. So I think that was Tony Ralston's worst game I've ever seen him play. I think it was Carter Vickers' worst game I've ever seen him play. I think it was Kieran Tierney's worst game I've ever seen him play. So you've got one guy in the back. I said, Scales the only player here that's getting pass marks, and people saying, "Oh, he can't pass." Well, he's like Iniesta compared to the rest of them last night. You know what I mean? It was absolutely ridiculous. And then you go into the midfield, and there's nothing happening. Kalmax, he must have an injured finger this morning from the amount of pointing he was doing. He made Peter Grant look as if he'd been resurrected. He was just running around pointing at all the places people were supposed to be going, and he wasn't doing it himself. There is no point in being there unless you're going to turn on the ball and make something happen. Passing the ball back to the centre halves is not a strategy. There is no point having the possession if you're going to do nothing with it. So Amati were great at compressing the space in the midfield, and we did nothing to solve that. Nothing at all. Nygren loses possession more than a drug dealer getting chased by the cops, right? And the same thing could be said for Hatate. They're all trying to play cute wee passes round the corner where there's no space, right? And there's no options up front. The passing out the back certainly wasn't good enough to put a ball over the top, and there's no options up front. Yang will get it and trip over it. James Forrest will get it, cut inside, bump into Nygren, lose possession. You know what I mean? And Dyson, what a season he had last year. It's starting to look as if, we should have sold him when we could have got 20 million for him, because he's tripping over himself this year, Dyson. He really is. He's been so poor. And as I say, a lot of this is down to staleness. A lot of this is not down to refreshing the squad, not even a matter of improving the squad. But the manager, what's the manager doing? I said last week, if that was me, I would have had Nygren on the right, Engels starting, Nygren on the right, and Luke McCowan on the left. Do you know what I mean? Make some sort of a change And at least that way, in those circumstances, if you're retaining possession, they're more likely to actually retain possession, and they can flood the midfield as well and win a second ball, which we're incapable of doing because Callum McGregor's left standing on his own with two guys, who are trying to do flips round the corner. So the number of things that are wrong tactically there is just unbelievable, and the manager seems incapable of saying, why are we starting with those wingers? We're talking about how poor the wingers are. Well, why are we starting with the wingers then? You know what I mean?
For 70 minutes. For 70 minutes.
No other formations. Are there no, the people say, oh, it's because, the players can't play another style of football. No, I disagree. I think it's the manager can't play another style of football.
I had a conversation last night about that. I was messaging another kind of prominent blogger and saying, well, I said, well, why can Rodgers not? He's an elite manager. How can he not change the system then? If he's that good a manager, how can he not use the players that he's got to fit them into a system that's going to work? And I was basically told, well, he's been spending months and months trying to ask for players to fit in the system he's got, and then he drills this system into the players that he's got there now. Why would they want to do that? I said, well, if he said months and months asking for players that he knows he's not going to get, why not spend day months working on a plan B on the training ground? So if it's not going to work, this 4-3-3 is clearly not working. Why not change it up and do something else? If he's an elite manager, surely it can get better out of the players that he's got, who should have been good enough to beat Kairat anyway.
Mm-hmm. When we get to this point, a couple of you have mentioned Kieran Tierney, and there's a few comments coming through in the comment section. Obviously, we tried to get him in January, right? And we ended up with Jeffrey Schlupp. We're obviously playing him a massive waste to get him back up here. And I remember all the chat in and around the fact that, he's injury prone, he's never going to play. We're at a stage now where we've had 10 pre-season games, 2 European games, League Cup games, 3 league games, plenty of games in, and he's no finishing games. Paddy, I'm going to ask you first. He's no finishing games. And you're thinking, well, at what point is he going to start finishing games? Because I get that you manage his game time, but you manage his game time where games are won, or we can actually bring in another left back like we did against Livingston. Not against Kairat in a game that £40 million riding on. This is the guy, this is the star signing of the season so far. He's 70 or 60 minutes and he's getting hooked. Paddy, is this a worse issue than we think it is?
It's got to be into it. I mean, when did he join us? Just about June, middle of June, end of June, I think. He had a full pre-season, like you said, all those pre-season games under his belt, but yet he was being sick against Aberdeen at half-time. I mean, surely being sick at that stage of the season, it should be well and truly gone. That's first week of pre-season, should it? No, it should be up to speed now. Instead of being, what was he taking off last night? 70th minute or something like that again? Aye. But who do we bring on to replace him? So like young Patrick was saying, the drop-off in quality is just something else. And Dave Murray came on, Liam Scales shifted out to the left, and Dave Murray did pretty well, if I'm honest. He did all right. As all right as he could, I suppose. But there's definitely something not right there. We're almost towards the end of August. We're 3 games into domestic league, and we've played, I think, 7 competitive fixtures, and team is still no fit. What is going on? What is going on there?
The thing with Tierney as well is he's one of the guys going into the Champions League. I always ask in pre-season, Paddy, who are you confident with in the squad in terms of the Champions League level? And Tierney's in there, and McGregor's in there. But I'm watching McGregor now, and I'm getting a lot of comments coming through. I had a great conversation with Alan 3 seasons ago, Alan Morrison. And Alan said to me, McGregor's not the answer, particularly in Europe, because of we're coming up against the Real Madrid midfield. That was that season. And I completely disagreed with him. And I think very much like Scott Brown, he would come back and he would prove people wrong, and we would have a great result, and he would play really well. I'm not seeing it at the moment. And I think last night I'm looking for him to grab that game, even mid-game, mid-flow, when things aren't working out, and making a change of tempo. I mean, the amount of times, I know that when you screenshot something, I'll come to you on this one, Patrick. You screenshot something, you think, look at all the options he's got, but I could see it in real time last night. And he's not going for these options, he's going for the safe option. And it's the amount of passes between the 2 centre-halves and Callum McGregor is more than anywhere else on the park. There is no risk-taking, there's no driving forward, carrying the ball forward, getting them on their back foot, etc. And I've got to say, I was critical of Adam Ida over the last few weeks because he wasn't dropping deep enough, and McGregor was giving him a hard time. I saw a lot of occasions last night where the striker was dropping deep, and McGregor still wasn't using the opportunity to either dink it over the top into the space or play it up so they could hold it up and then maybe play it out to the wing. I don't know what the issue is with Callum McGregor, but I didn't see anything at all last night that would suggest, had he not been the captain, that he should be playing.
Yeah, it is a concern, and obviously as another year older. I think he's, 32? Yeah, what he say, 31, 32. So he is getting older. He's retired from Scotland, obviously. And it was as bad as I've ever seen him, to be honest. And, I'm not... I don't know the tactical side of the game as well as Alan Morrison might, the analytical side. And, there's obviously been a big demand at certain points for a Wanyama type player. It's as if we've missed a Wanyama type player ever since Wanyama left. Someone really physical, put the foot in the ball and grab the game by the scruff of the neck. And McGregor has done that in the past, and he is, as you say, classed as one of the Champions League quality midfielders. But it is the sort of inevitability of time. He's been in and around the squad for, I think, 11, 12 years now. And he is getting older, and he needs to have his games managed. But we're in serious trouble if he's one of the guys that you're taking out the squad when it comes to a Champions League game. That's a real disaster, because he's one of the guys that you can always rely on. But constant backwards passing, a complete lack of creativity. And none of the other midfielders, had an exceptional game. I mean, Engels looked positive, but again, can't clear the first man at a corner. Terrible at corners. It's as if it's coached out of him. I mean, he came in, he could take a corner. He's been at Celtic just over a year and gone. That ability has been lost. If I was Paulo Bernardo, by the way, I'd be tempted to hand in a transfer request, because you're watching that 210 minutes of football, and the manager's not picking you. He thinks that Bernardo isn't good enough to break into that. I mean, that is absolutely mental. And young players as well. I know we've obviously we're trying to bleed in Dane Murray. Donovan's came on the last 2 games and looked positive. But our winger situation and the form of some of our midfielders, youngsters must look at us and think, I am never going to get a game if I can't break into this squad. So there's real concerns with the squad management. And again, Paddy, you were talking earlier about, what's the budget if we do make the Champions League? What's the budget if we don't make the Champions League? It would appear that if we don't make the Champions League, the budget is 3 million, because that's what we've spent so far. We are now in worst case scenario where we have not made the Champions League and we've only spent 3 million. So either we can't get deals over the line, we can't identify players, or we're sort of skimping out and try to do things on the cheap. It's possible it's all 3, to be honest. You really don't know. And again, just to go back to the corporate thing, the strategy, if there is one, has cost us 20, 30, 40 million in revenue by not qualifying. Where's the CEO? The only time you hear from him is the AGM. We have just taken a 20, 30 million pound hit in revenue, and no interview, no statement. You never hear from the guy. And it's all well and good when it's rosy in the garden and you're winning trebles and doubles, but that is the biggest disaster we've had in Europe in a long, long time. And any other company, I know football's a different business to regular companies, but you really should be hearing from these guys as to what the strategy is, because we don't know what the money's for. We don't know what the strategy is.
Well, we don't know what it is, Patrick. We don't know what it is, but neither does the manager, apparently.
I know.
Now, he's repeated that enough times now that we can't just pretend that it is him deflecting to protect, the business that's ongoing. It's very, very clear he doesn't know what's happening, right?
John, do you think it's broken down to the point, like the last time, where you hear lots and lots of behind the scenes tales that the relationship had broken down to such an extent that it was almost as if people were actually doing things deliberately so that the other one would walk he did? Is it getting to that point again, John? Do you get the sense that it's completely broken?
Getting to that point, when has it not been that point? Have we got any evidence that that's not been the case since he came through the door?
That beautiful photograph of them all shaking hands when he came back.
God.
Remember that one? That wasn't contrived at all.
That was like watching Stalin shaking hand with Politburo members that were about to be executed. That was absolutely grim. It was so contrived. But look, if the manager is not Now, I remember criticising Brendan very heavily for his first window when he came in, and he clearly hadn't seen some of the players that we said. You're getting paid £3 million a year. Was it 3.5 million even? You're paid £3 million. What are you doing that's more important than looking at these players coming in? Right? And then subsequently today, it's like, oh, I don't know what's happening. How can you not know? How can you not know? That is totally unacceptable. You should be all over it. You should be. This should be your every waking minute. Should be what is happening. How much are we spending? How much have we got left? What's the plan? That doesn't going to work. What's the backup plan? How can you just sit at a press conference and shrug your shoulders? Unacceptable. You are part of the face of this. You're managing this team. How can you manage a team without knowing what's been done to strengthen the team? I'm sorry, it just isn't good enough, right? You could pay someone 50 quid a year to do that. I could sit here in press conferences when they say what's happening and go, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's unacceptable. So it starts from the board, but Brendan Rodgers got a lot to answer for here. But obviously, I don't know if it's just a matter of him not being motivated enough to go and find out what the hell's going on, or being too afraid of confrontation to find out what's going on. But if he's not going to do that, then what use is he? Because that leaves it in the hands of guys who don't know anything about football. Unless we're talking about Michael Nicholson's coaching background, which I seem to think doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Or his background in football transfers, which consists of doing the paperwork.
Yeah.
Right? So, and Chris Mackay as well, and even the board, and Chris Mackay is obviously an accountant, Michael Nicholson's a lawyer. The board is full of, you've got another accountant, you've got a guy who works for Apple, who's the only person who could still be the only the functioning board member on any properly governed board. And Tom Allison, well-known businessman, been in for 24 years. I'd say he is not independent. So, just my opinion. But I mean, you're looking at a situation where it's not just the team that's stale. The board is so stale and so comfortable and so arrogant in that comfort because they think they've got everything right. They think they've nailed it, right? Because in the last years, I say, they've had some incredibly lucky breaks, but not because of something they were doing properly. Because the thing that they were trying to do was a catastrophe, didn't work, and ended in embarrassment, and then they had, last-minute decisions to make and got lucky.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, but I mean, Brendan's position in this for me is just outrageous. I'm not even talking about how bad the football is, but his inability to make his case to that executive is unacceptable.
That's part of his role. You're spot on, John. And the thing as well, Paddy, you will have written about this. Joseph McGonigal says, thank you for the therapy session. And the reason I'm bringing that up, Joseph, is we're talking as fans, but it's not just fans who are talking about our inability to do business. Brendan Rodgers is talking about it. Callum McGregor's talking about it. Other football club directors, Go Ahead Eagles, they're talking about it. Ex-players, Benji Seagust, they're talking about it. So it's not just fans having a moan and a greeting session, Paddy. No. Everybody is saying Celtic can't do business.
No. I mean, it's going back to... We're looking for some sort of indication for the board of what's happening at the club, and a lot of people will say, well, would you expect them to tell you the transfer strategy, X, Y, and Z? Why not? Dave Cormack done it last week. He came out and told Aberdeen fans, this is the chairman of the club, or the owner of the club, he came out and told them when they expect to do signs, how many signs are after, and what they plan to do before the transfer window closes. We've had nothing from Michael Nicholson. We've also had Partick Thistle board coming out asking their fans about what do they think about the allocation they're going to give Celtic in the League Cup. So they know how to do fan engagement. So does Wrexham. They've done it as well. Mm-hmm. So we're not looking for a big, massive plan from the board, but give us something. Let us know what's happening. What is the plan moving on now? What was the plan? Was there even a plan at all? I don't know. But other clubs, owners, other clubs, chairmen, other clubs, boards seem to have no issue talking to the fans, but ours does. Ours are probably more interested in disciplining the fans than giving them an idea or any semblance of what's happening at the club. So Paul John, I don't even know what to say about it. I don't even know what to say about what's going on at the club now. It's a shadow of the one that we've seen in the last, 3 years when Ange Postecoglou came in. But then even at that, we looked to own that as well.
There's a contempt, and I think that's a big issue. There's a real contempt towards the fan base.
%.
You know, we sing sack the board. It's more of a slogan than actually an intent, because we know we can't actually sack them as such. We sing sack the board, so they put the PA up to drown us out. You know, we bring tifos into the stadium, so they ban the tifos or they ban the people with the tifos.
These flags.
And they shut the hospitality curtains. That's what they do. They just shut you up. You know, they constantly do that. AG, last comment from yourself. Thank you for supporting the channel. No home games for a month will probably just help the board bury their heads in the sand and do nothing. The worst result in our history. Surely it's up there. It is up there, and it's certainly one of the worst ever in Europe. When you look at the standing, I called them a European minnow, and it wasn't being disrespectful. This is the biggest result in Kazakhstan football history, coming through into the Champions League last night. Make no mistake about it. Now, one last thing. What I'm kind of saying here is, in terms of people coming together, it's a lot harder, despite the amount of communication vehicles that we've got these days. It's a lot harder these days than it was back in the 1990s to stabilise a fan base. But what I would say, for anyone out there who is a member of the trust, there is an AGM that you may or may not be aware of on Tuesday at 7 o'clock at Gracie's. Get along to that AGM, because I think that even if they can't get the shares that they're going for, John, because some of the figures you've mentioned today show how big an ask that's going to be, I think we need some form of a platform that is a spokesperson, if you like, for all the other fan bases. If you like, you've got ultras, you've got podcasts, you've got all these guys in the fanzine movement. Bring it all together and have a voice and a dialogue between an association of sorts and the football club. So even if that's what comes out of it, then I think that's a positive. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think that there might be movement happening very, very soon there. Listen, 3,500, in fact, 3,700 strong on the live stream, which is unbelievable. And it shows you the level of frustration in and amongst the Celtic fan base the day after a horrific and embarrassing result in Europe. People really should be held to account. That's what we're trying to say here. How do we do it? Let us know in the comment section. Thank you, every single person, for tuning in. Thank you to Paddy and Patrick and John for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.
Yeah, well.